Welcome to Self-Directed. We are your hosts, Cecilia and Jesper Conrad, and today's guest is Robin Robertson. Hey, Robin, good to meet you. The reason we wanted to chat with you is actually because I had a great laugh when I saw your Instagram handle, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. It made me think back on this, what is an early 80 or 90 movies. I don't know if that was, that's why, right? I hope so.
Honey, I Shrank the Kids. Yeah. My kids love that movie. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
I think maybe also it made you think back on the moment when I said,
oh, yeah.
Honey, I'm homeschooling the kids. And you were like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah.
For us, it was like that. I'm normal kind of dad. Now we are 10 years down the road of unschooling. So I'm.
You used to be the standard guy.
I used to be the standard guy coming from the suburbs, thinking, what's that homeschooling stuff? That's kind of weird. And it seems to me it's the women who are more progressive in taking it in this direction. Was it the same in your family?
Oh, yes and no. In the beginning, it was my husband's idea, actually. We wanted to go traveling. We'd always talked about traveling with our kids. My husband and I traveled quite a bit before we were married. When we got married, we actually were living in two different countries and then came together in one to get married and then went back to two different places. But it was something we always wanted to do with our kids. And then once we were married and we started having kids, and we kind of got to a point where, we had bought a house and we were doing our, normal thing down the path, and we needed to make some changes. And my husband was the one who suggested, like, why don't we take them out of school and go travel now? Because if we don't do it, we could just continue and this will never happen, kind of thing. It might work to solve some of the things that we needed to fix. And it was kind of like, we can try. And if it doesn't work, then we just come back home and continue on. And if it does, then great. So we did. It was his idea. And he said, I had asked, well, what about school? Like, what are we going to do? And it was his idea to homeschool originally. He said, well, we can homeschool them. Like, it will work. You can do it. No problem. I have confidence that we can do it. So it was really his idea. He was a catalyst for it all. And then as we began to homeschool and stayed away longer than we had planned, then we started kind of evolving into unschooling. And it was just seemed almost like a natural progression, I guess, as our kids got older and, more independent, and just the lifestyle that we were living, it fit. So that's kind of how we got into it.
Yeah, I think for us, it was kind of the same, or I was the nervous dad who
in that respect, it was not the same.
Not the same. No, but the slide into unschooling.
Yeah, from homeschooling to unschooling. It seems like a normal progression for a lot of people. You think you have to homeschool, and then you find out, it's actually an unnecessary waste of time. And then you just start living, which you can call unschooling if you like.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't really talk about it anymore, except when we do these podcasts. And
I hear you. Yes.
To explain to people who don't know us, but we do live as if schools didn't really exist.
Yeah. That's not a big.
But I'm curious as to you talk about home and traveling and going out and coming back. So where is home now?
Home now is Canada, Northern Alberta, Canada. Actually, it's where we live is fairly remote and rural. But if anybody knows, the area is called the Peace Country, North Peace. So the closest, some people might know Grand Prairie as the closest center. It's very
people in the area might know it at least.
Yes, natural resource heavy kind of area. Most don't know it, but that's where we are in Northern Alberta, Canada. That's home right now.
And you stopped the traveling. You came back to living in a more permanent home, or
we did. We came back to Canada, and my husband's family is here. And that's what this is the first time we had ever lived here in this location in Alberta in Canada. So we came back from South Korea, actually, is where we were before we came back to Canada. And we thought this would be a stopover for a few short months as we continued on in our journey. And it's turned into 8 years that we've been here now.
A long stopover.
A long stopover, which it worked out as it needed to work out, and we're happy here. And so that's how we got to this particular place. But we thought we would probably move back to Canada and relocate somewhere else in Canada. Not exactly here, but this is where we are. So we haven't been traveling like we were. We would do trips like in a year kind of thing. So before the pandemic and everything shut down, our last trip was Australia. And we actually got home just as everything closed, as everything shut. But,
lucky you.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we've been doing things now. And then I can share more. We now, our oldest is 16. He'll be 17 this year. Our youngest is 13. And they, our oldest he lives away from home for probably more than half the year. He's done that since he was 14. So when he is home, we kind of now just enjoy having him with us for the time he's here. So we haven't actually, he just got his new passport in the mail yesterday. So, we can start looking to going places again, maybe when he is home and around us again. But that's kind of how it looks now. So at the moment, we're enjoying our family being together again.
Yes, we started our travels 5 years ago, and until that we had many years in Copenhagen with Danish winters, and now our oldest is we have a grown up who's almost 24, but our oldest who traveled with us on full time, he just turned 17. And when we have this talk where it's like, how long time do we have left where he wants to keep traveling? But as he has been traveling from he was 12 till now, this is his youth. This is what he is used to most of all. So we hope that we have him a couple of years more on a full-time basis before he become like more like a satellite dropping in from now and then.
Well, it's hard to predict.
It is, absolutely. And there's also, in Denmark, it's normal, to move away from home the day you turn 18 almost, right? And people think that is normal. And now we are here in southern Italy, where you live home until you marry, until you go to university. So it's
until you finish university.
Yeah. So normal is just very weird sometimes when we look at it.
Normal is very weird. Depending what our normal is, it's true. We think that a normal has to be a certain way, but depending where you are, normal can be very different at each place.
And we have to step out of it to think about what kind of normal will we accept as something we also would call, normal is that what everybody are doing, or is it what is natural and right? It's not necessarily natural and right just because everyone else are doing it, and we call it normal, and then we connote. How do you say it in English? Connotere. So we mean by normal that if it's normal, it's right. If it's normal, it's natural. If it's normal, we expect everyone to do it. And I think that's one of the most important things we learned from moving around, that we can invent normal, our normal. What's normal for us, and maybe it's just normal for a chapter. Like now you've had a chapter of an 8-year stopover, and it's one chapter of your life, and you've had other chapters, and they all are equal. It's not like just because I used to live in a bus traveling in a big red veteran bus, it's not, and I don't want to do that now. It wasn't wrong to do it when I did it. It's just not right now. So I think that's one of the conversations we keep having. So what's right for us at this point in time?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think for the point in time, in some ways I'm a little bit envious of you still traveling, because I do find that, or I found that when we are traveling, just because that is just different from many, being different, you're just kind of in that flow more so than being here, like where we've stopped for quite a long time. You begin to be surrounded by a certain kind of normal or acceptance of what's normal, and it starts to seep in to you as well, and to our family, right? And it's true you saying that, because I think, well, what is seeping in is very normal to us now, because that's our environment that we've been in for such a long period of time. Wasn't always that normal for us, and it's not normal for other people as well. It's nice to be on the road, and because I find when you're traveling, you're also very present. You almost have to be when you're in a new place, new language, new space, new food. Everything is very new. You're that much more in the moment. While when you're somewhere for a longer period of time, you can start to become a little bit, it's just, you almost take for granted those new experiences or those differences that you really take in when you're on the road as well. So, yeah.
I totally agree. I also think that when we travel, we get to find a really nice balance between habits and everyday life and adventure, because when we sometimes stop for long and everyday life takes over, we always cook this kind of pasta, whatever, we get these habits and they take over, and it's like we have to do the laundry before we can go for a walk, whatever kind of rules we make up for ourselves. It's kind of like a trap. But then on the other hand, when we break free and go and everything is new, it can be a little too much, overwhelming, chaotic, and we need to find where are the habits that we actually enjoy holding on to, so that we stay on the path of the life we want to live, and what is just, this is how we do when we're in Sicily, or this is how we do when we're in France, but it doesn't have to be like that all the time. And I think that trap is really hard to get out of, staying in one place. So that's one of the big advantages, but maybe you can find a way around it. Just sleep on the couch now and then, do something different, wake up, go sleep in the car.
Yeah. We still looking for new experiences and different things around us within our environment, for sure. Connecting with people who, maybe, that's how I always find, is meeting people who maybe that in your current environment and people around you wouldn't always connect with, but that we connect with to
Robin,
to keep.
One thing we did before we started our travels, we invited people to stay with us. It had young people as workaways or woofing kind of stuff. And it was a way of getting to traveling indoors without being traveling. And it was also a fantastic experience just to have extra hands in the kitchen, but then also these young people coming with their whole life story. And we are almost in contact with all of them still. And it was really wonderful way of starting to travel full time without being on the road. When I think back,
it was a good way of breaking normal.
Oh yes,
you just have a new person in the home. Suddenly,
and they are very different from you sometimes, and that's okay.
Nice.
It was nice. It breaks up your normality spectrum. One thing I'm always curious about when we talk to people is, why are you sharing? I know why we are sharing. For me, it's there's a combination. One of them is
you're asking a question, not answering it yourself.
Yeah, that's right. She's clever.
So why am I?
You have a social media?
Yeah, the whole honey, I'm homeschooling the kids. What's going on? What are you doing with it?
So I started that because at one point I had so many questions, and I was trying to find answers and connect with others. When we first started traveling, we actually first moved to Jamaica because my dad is from Jamaica. And so we actually moved to the island and we moved in with my dad. And there I tried to find other homeschoolers while we were there, and I just could not. I actually met one mom who was an unschooler. She unschooled her kids, but her kids were now like in their late 20s and gone, kind of thing. And so it was great to talk with her, but finding other families that were homeschooling was really difficult. And of course you begin and you're like, but what, I wanted to know all these things. And as we continued and changed, and I still had questions, we came to Canada, and I love listening to podcasts because that was a first. And I would always complain to my husband, like, oh, I wish there were more podcasts on homeschooling and unschooling and alternative learning and, this kind of thinking. And because I was just wanting to absorb more information. Yeah. And so finally he was like, why don't you just start one yourself? And then you can bring it to you. And we had friends as well who lived in Florida that were homeschooling that we were connected with. And that mom and I were going to start a podcast together, and it turned out it didn't work out for her, but I just continued. And that was the beginning, was really to get answers to my questions and start building a community, even if they weren't right there with me, that I could connect with people around the world in different places and hear their stories. And I think the biggest thing about hearing others' stories and sharing those stories is that, like, for someone like me at the time, and still continuously, is it's inspiring. And it's important to hear those differences, because although our lives may have a lot of similarities, we still have unique differences, and we can take and learn and try, but also be inspired to know that, okay, there are people who are forging that new path, who are taking the leap, who are facing those big fears, who are doing something outside of that, quote unquote, normal. And this is what it looks like for them. This is what they've overcome. This is what they're working through. This is what they've received from it. This is what their kids, because everyone's always like, big question is, how are the kids going to turn out? If you don't do the thing that everyone else is doing, the sure path that guarantees this, this, and this, or supposedly guarantees this, this, and this. Yeah. You're taking this gamble with your kids. Like, what happens if it all goes down the drain, kind of thing. And I think it's important to share the stories of others who are doing something different and to know what it looks like. Because it's scary. It's a big unknown.
Scary.
It helps when you know that you're not the only person stepping off that cliff, right? That there's other people, there's like a lagoon that's beautiful down at the bottom that others are playing in and traveling going to other places.
You just need to fall. Yeah,
exactly. That other people have taken the leap. And so that's how it began. And that's why I continue, because I do think it's important. We hear so much about that other well-worn path that's a guaranteed route to certain things. And usually people are discouraged from leaving that path, really discouraged. I've worked in private education for years. I've worked in public. I work now in public school governance. So I hear a lot about that side and how much you really are discouraged not to leave that path. Mm-hmm. And I find even if you're immersed in that, you almost don't know that people like us even exist, that their kids are out here doing these things. And you're discouraged from leaving that worn path that way, because if you don't know about it, if you don't know that kids are actually following their interests, that they're actually out in the world, that they're experiencing things, they're working jobs, they're creating, they are taking downtime, they're doing the things that are very different from the mainstream path, and they're still great people. They're still adding value to the world. They're still positive. They're what they need to be. They're themselves, and they're still able to exist and grow. And even though they've never lived with school, that it's possible. So, that's my biggest thing, is that we have to share more stories of what it looks like and that it's possible, because, how to encourage others that need it or need that, that encouragement to take that chance or to try, even if it's for 6 months or a year, that there are other possibilities that are out there.
At least knowing. I think so. I started blogging like, I don't know, 11 years ago about this alternative lifestyle, and now then social media came, and now podcasting, but it's the same. I found I have the exact same story. There was just like close to no info out there. I was like 2 or 3 blogs, and it was all Americans. And, you know, being in Europe, it was like, okay, thank you very much, but I'm somewhere else in a very different context. Yes. In a country with like, so we have 5-6 million Danes, and there were like 3 or 4 families homeschooling. That's it.
Wow.
It was like, you know,
it was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So we were like really the odd ones out when we started.
Really the odd ones
like,
out.
Really like, okay, this is crazy. Even though in our constitution, it's a right. It's like, it's a right. It's not like an option. You can find like a leap somewhere. It's a right. The word homeschooling is in my constitution. I didn't know about it. And I have a very nice education. So it's, I don't know. The lack of info was huge. And being from Europe, it was even smaller. I mean, if you were in Las Americas. And well, so I have the same agenda. I just want to put a little light out there in the darkness, because when I was looking for answers, and when I was looking for someone to talk to with my fear and my doubt, it was very lonely. Back then. It really was. It's different now. It's very different. And after COVID, even more different. I mean, loads of people homeschool now. It's also different, not sure always in a good way, where we come from. I think
people have taken the school home.
It's more than, it's less of a free thinking mind and more of a, I can do better. And then they do school at home just better. And well, that's another story. But I would like to ask you, what's the climate in Canada? I have not the weather, but like for homeschoolers. I'm not interested in the weather. No, but you know, how many people homeschool? Can you find anyone to hang out with? What's the political situation for homeschoolers? How are you doing over there?
So homeschooling Canada, it's very different depending what province you live in. The province I live in Alberta is probably, from what I hear, I know one homeschooler in Denmark, and what she tells me, there's some similarities where here in Alberta, it's become actually more open, but usually you have to report that you are a homeschooler, and you have a kind of a facilitator who checks in with you, kind of thing. But the one thing with reporting, now they've actually passed a new kind of educational law where if you want to just report to the government that you're homeschooling, and then that's it, say, I'm not connected with any school or board, I want no facilitator, I want to be free. That is, you can do that now. With the reporting, they do give you numbers. And I think here in Alberta, we probably have a population in our province of about over 3 million in our province. And I'm trying to think, maybe like there's well over 10,000 homeschoolers in just this province, but the way they govern it across the country is different. Quebec, for where Montreal is, for example, is the strictest. There's a lot of limitations where you're not allowed, you only can follow the curriculum if you homeschool. They have very strict measures. It's not as open. So that has changed. Other places it's more open, but homeschooling is quite large. Like there's a lot of homeschoolers in Canada, but I think it's just pockets of certain places where you have a large amount and less in certain places. And, you know, the political climate, the actual changes things here. Where we are in rural Alberta, I think traditionally there were a lot of homeschoolers that people just didn't really know about because people live so far apart and it's so remote that for some it was just easier because where we live, for kids going to school, they get on the bus and they are on the bus for 45 minutes to an hour to get to the closest town to go to school early in the morning, wintertime, and then at night. So I think some chose just for ease to homeschool over the years. There is very religious pockets in different parts of our province who are homeschooling. And then you have others who, like you said, after COVID, who are now, taking the choice, but others who were like us that just, chose a different path and it worked well for them. And there's a very active community in our province for sure. So
wonderful. There was a thing you said earlier when we talked about homeschooling and your choice and wanting to share it, where you mentioned the word the gamble, that you're gambling, and everybody are, of course, gambling with their child's education. And it just struck me as fun that it would be, people would think I was very rude if I met a person and said, "Oh, why are your kids there in school? Oh, do you dare that? Do you dare that gamble?" Because it is, I mean, if I've looked at some of the Danish numbers, and we had a talk recently with Peter Gray, who looks into the statistics of how the anxiety level and depression level among students. I'm like, actually today I wouldn't dare, but it would not feel normal for people if I went and asked them that. So I think it's fun that people believe it's okay to ask people who take another choice that, but it's maybe just the price of being the odd one out,
Yeah, it is a gamble, anything that you do, I think, really, because you don't know, there's no guarantee, there's no absolute certainty in anything that we choose in life, right? So, and that's even going to school, absolutely. You don't know what's going to happen.
Me and I have two siblings, and we went to the same school, and we have three very different kind of experiences because we had different teachers. I was lucky, had good teachers. My brother's teachers, they were shitty, and there was too much bullying in his classroom, and it's the same school. So, even that's a big gamble.
But the thing is, if you follow the mainstream path and you send your kids off to be looked after by someone else throughout most of their childhood, where we come from, it's normal to let go of them before they can even walk. And, you leave them at 8 in the morning, you pick them up at 4 or 5, something like that, the whole childhood. That's normal. And if it turns out bad, you can always explain that it was the shitty school teacher or the bullying or something. But if you do it yourself, then it's your fault, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's not very nice. It would be nicer to just kind of hide behind something. And I think that's the big problem. And that's actually also the reason we very rarely let our children speak in these podcasts and ask us anything, and because they would have to stand and be this perfect example of a human being, just because they are homeschooled, then everybody are looking at them like they're this purple giraffe, and they have to perform like the most amazing Cirque du Soleil, and it's not fair.
Not fair. I agree.
They should be allowed to just be who they are, and life will take its turns on them. And do you come out perfect? That's a big question. Some people become professors, others become happy, and it's not necessarily the same. But the homeschooled children, they are first row to be criticized and to be looked upon and to be judged and to have to defend their childhood, and so the same story goes for the parents. We have to perform in a kind of a little bit too much way, and we have to let go of that idea that it's my fault. It's not necessarily my fault. Maybe it's not even a fault. How can we know that?
I agree. So, I think that's one of the hard things with social media, because now especially, I think I've been sharing less about my kids because they're like, we're just living our life, they don't want to be on display. I always get a lot of requests though from people saying, we want to see your kids more, and, things like, which is nice. But at the same time, I agree. It's like, they just want to be themselves and not have to feel like they're trying to measure up to the standard of a successful homeschool child kind of thing. And if they don't, then they're going to feel pressure. We're not doing this for them to feel pressure to look a certain way. This is just us living our life. And I find that's also, it's interesting too, because people want to see more of what they're doing, but like you said, it's not even unschooling. We're just living our life. And it's kind of like, do you really want to see us my son getting up this morning and getting dressed and packing his lunch and going off to work? Like, he's gone. That's his day. I'm not going to see him till the end of the day, kind of thing, right? It's nice. My daughter's going to go and get her haircut today and, then they're going to go to volleyball practice tonight. And, I'm sure she's up right now reading her book in her bed. And, I could relate all of those things. And a lot of times people want to hear, well, how do you get the learning from that? How do you know that they're learning by, and, I think they don't want to have to explain that this is how they're learning through living their everyday life as well. People want to hear the story sometimes, but they want to hear it in a certain way to prove something. When you're like you said, you don't want that responsibility, that being at fault or proving something, when can you just live your life? And, we're just trying to be the best that we can be. I really do feel that people are just doing the best that they can. And everybody's best looks very different as well. But yet we think it all has to look a certain way. Well, no one is at that standard. We complain that we don't want our kids to be standardized with education, yet we set this bar for every family to be standardized and look a certain way when nobody does. We all come from different places and experiences. We live our daily lives very differently. And, it's interesting that we try and want to see our even homeschooling families measure up to a certain way when, we don't even live our life that way. So it's trying to fit into the standard when getting to the standard you might have to do this and this and this, but we're way over here. So
the question is also very often when you get these kinds of questions, people want to know where's the learning? What do you do? What does a normal day look like? I've had that question 1,000 times. What does a normal day look like? And I'm like, I don't even know what that question means.
Yeah.
The thing is, you'd have to let go. Unschooling is a philosophy, and the answers to the philosophy comes from, well, now our oldest kids can explain it, obviously, as they are almost adults, but it should come from the parents. And it is the kids, they don't have a problem not being in school. It's the adults who are schooled into the idea of schooling, who has this whole matrix going on and this whole fear thing going on, that need to let go and let the children just live their lives. Because if you do look at a quote unquote normal day, or let's say we take a random sample of 15 different normal days and look at our lives, it looks like weekend. I mean,
that's right.
It looks like vacation. And it's only when you think it over and understand the philosophy and what personal freedom really means, and see the full picture, that you can understand how unschooling can be something equivalent of education, or maybe something better. Mm-hmm. Whereas just looking at what they do in a normal day, you wouldn't learn anything from it. That's why we've refused 1,000 times also when journalists want to, come into our lives or do an article or come filming. We just want to see what you're doing. It's not interesting. No. I mean, that's not interesting. It's how we think about what we're doing. And maybe it's what we're not doing that's interesting, and how that unfolds when you do it year after year after year, living this life of inventing your own meaningfulness.
Absolutely.
Which is really annoying. Wouldn't you wish, Robyn, sometimes it would be very easy to explain to people how this works?
Yes, I do. Yeah. And some people do get it, because in some ways they've been searching and wanted it for themselves or their children for all their lives, but they've just never been able to see it or connect with someone who's doing it or can talk about it. Sometimes I get people who are like, oh my God, like that's what I wanted. Or, I begged my parents to take me out of school and do this, but we just weren't able to do so. Or, and then some don't, because also I find sometimes people are a little bit upset by it because it pushes buttons for them, their own internal buttons of, it makes them uncomfortable. And, sometimes I find, that is, you think it's you, or you being wrong about, and the immediate reaction is to make you wrong. Right. And it took time also to realize that, and again, letting go and just being okay and finding our own path or our own way and getting to there where you realize, okay, it's actually not me. This is about them. And I'm not even saying something, but just how we are being, our family is being, or what we are happen to do or not do. I think that's a big thing. What we're not doing is really uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Obviously.
And very uncomfortable.
It makes sense. It totally makes sense. That's where the pass me the salt answer comes into the question. We just change the subject because it's not the right person to talk to about this. And I don't want to annoy other people with my lifestyle. I can totally talk about something else. It's more when someone really wants to know, but they are too close to the schooled way of thinking. And I have to spend 2 or 3 hours explaining the philosophy of homeschooling and unschooling and personal freedom and living in an environment of unconditional love and all these things. And they keep coming back to, but how does a normal day look, and how do they learn, and how do you know? And I, but then we had a very interesting conversation also on this podcast thing. I can't remember who it was. Someone said, you have to think about, sometimes people need to get the information 27 times.
Absolutely.
And maybe you're the one who is saying that for the 11th time, and it feels like a waste of time, but it's not, because that means the next person can be the 12th. And at some point they get to 27 and then they get it.
That's right.
That helped me a lot, actually, because this has been so frustrating. I get so annoyed with people. They ask something and then they don't listen when I answer.
Yeah, that's right. Or it's not computing. They're not understanding.
It's like water and booze. Do you say that in English? Yeah.
I have a great experience now. My current work as a public school board trustee, it's a governance level in public education. And so I live in a small community, so I get a chance to just, I know a lot of community members, a lot of teachers and educators, and I've been friends before I came into this role, and they feel comfortable asking, I'll see someone. I remember there was someone I knew, and we were at a party or a gathering, and she had asked me about, and she was a teacher, and I didn't realize until she asked that question, how she was very much about following the steps and checking things off. And, she'd asked me a question about homeschooling. And the answer that I could see that it was like, I did not know that. Like, I thought it was only this way. I had no idea. And she had said, I didn't know that families could do that. What she had asked me, she's like, I just didn't think it was allowed, but now, okay. And she went away from that conversation, just kind of obviously a bit more open. But she'd has come back to me time and time again, coming up with that kind of like, no, but this shouldn't be okay. And then I'll just ask Robyn about it then. And she'll ask me and I'll explain, and then she'll kind of go away like, okay, I can tell her mind is turning, but she just needs a lot of time to process it. And then she'll come back again and ask, but what about high school diploma? But what about what is this? What about, this? And, I'll explain things from our experience, what our family has lived and why it's possible because we're living it this way. But I see it slowly open more and more, but it's also very slowly opening more and more. And like she said, I've just never had a chance to ask anybody about it who's been able to share this information with me. So yeah, it's, some are ready to hear it. Some are just learning. You might be the first opening ever, and it might not be until 10 years later that they might see something that reminds me of that conversation. That's right. So this is how this looks after this. Or, there's a lot of openings I think that we're also offering and sharing the stories, but it's also hard when now I think there's more stories being shared that are normalizing it. We go back to the word normal, right? Because there's more people doing it in some ways. But it's still different, and it's still, people, not everyone is exposed to it. Not everyone is even searching. It's not going to come up in their feed about homeschooling or unschooling. It's going to come up about how to get your kids to do their homework at night, how to make sure you have them in bed by 9 o'clock, how you can get them to complete these certain courses by a certain time in this school year, how you can get extra tutoring to make sure that they're the top of their class. So people are also being streamed into this kind of environment. So something like your family or our family is so absolute. Like, think how different that is, right? I think of, like, say you lived in a northern Canadian, say you lived in Nunavut in the far north, and so for example, I have a good friend. She is an educator. She's an unschooling parent. She's been a principal and a teacher. Her early teaching jobs were in, her first was in Nunavut, which is like the North Arctic. And she had said when she came in and she was talking about this lesson about building a garden and wanting the kids to build a garden with her. And she was excited because it was hands-on and all this sort of stuff. And she got a blank stare and there was no engagement. And finally, it took some time for her to realize in conversation with the students that they don't garden because they live in the Arctic. A garden is not going to grow. They don't know what a garden, like, they've read about a garden, but it's not real for them. They've never seen it or experienced it. Like, the community goes out on their seal hunts and whale hunts, and they store the meat for the whole community, in a certain place. And it's a very different, like, you're driving your Skidoo most of the year. You're not driving a convertible around. You're, getting things flown in because there's no access. It's a very different, if you have no relation or experience, sometimes it's just hard to comprehend some things. So yeah, it's an interesting path. And it's also, when you hear so much about even, talking about unschooling or living our life, everyone wants to relate it to how it looks or doesn't look like school. And I find, like, with, articles and interviews, it's why are you not doing something like school, or how does this relate to school? But it's not even about school. It's about, like, parenting. It's about our relationship with our kids, more so that than anything. And it's about trying to step into that understanding of, I can have a relationship with my children where we are in a conversation flow, where we're creating an environment that's safe so that they can share and be open. And that's the priority over making sure they get a biology class. Maybe if they want one, great. But, the priority is having that conversation of, them saying, okay, this isn't what I'm interested in, or this is what I would love to do. I'm looking for help or support, and feeling comfortable suggesting something that may seem really different. And, it's so much more about building that environment of connection, of independence, of experience and practice of life, than it is trying to look like school. And really, that's not what school is. School is not about that. The framework and structure of school has a very different purpose. And, so much of the conversation usually is like, we want to homeschool because school is failing our kids. It's not meeting its goal. Actually, school is meeting its goal. The purpose of school has not changed, and they still are trying to fulfill that specific purpose of creating a specific kind of citizen in a specific way. And the structure of school does not allow a small connection of community. There's so many layers and check marks and balances and benchmarks because of the structure. That's just the way that school is built and made. You have, obviously, depending where you live, you have the population who vote in a certain government that they feel responsible to. They said they campaigned for something, so they want to be accountable for this. So then it's passed down to the next layer, then it's passed down to a school board trustee, to administration, to principals, to teachers, to the last person on that ladder are the kids, honestly, the way the structure flows. The kids are the bottom layer. So they just
make a result even.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's the most horrible thing. It's all the hours we steal from the children. They pay with their time.
They do.
Never get back.
No.
But the other thing as well is being realistic about it. School also serves a purpose of taking care of your children while you work. School is there it's combined with our economy, with our country's economy, with our country's purpose of having a certain world or existence. And, it really now goes hand in hand, because children can go be contained somewhere for the work hours. So parents can also feel better that, you're working, you're providing for your family so you can live. Your kids can't come to work with you. That's not okay in our culture for most places. So they need to go somewhere. So here's this place where all the other kids, everyone, it's an agreement. It's a big
and then we make up this fantasy story that we do it because then they will get this amazing academic education that they need, which they,
of course. Yeah, you have to feel better about that choice.
That's just a cover story.
Yeah, that's right.
And very often it's not true even. I mean, might write down in a plan that they learn all these amazing things, but they don't. At the end of the day, they don't learn all these things. Maybe they have to learn it, they should learn it, it's in the test, but nobody really takes it with them. So
no,
it's a waste of time.
Yeah. And but also you think about that purpose of what school is doing. That time there is, they have to fill that time. When you have children for 8 hours in a day, that time has to be filled somehow. And you have to, in our way that we're viewing, then it's also like, it has to look like it's productive as well, right? You have to.
So you write the alphabet 500 times.
Yeah.
My children literally learn to write letters with a pencil by doing it once.
Right. Yeah.
They don't have to fill out that whole book. I mean, they're not stupid. It's just do it, and then you've done it, and then you know how to do it. It's not rocket science, but in the schools they have to sit kids down and then they do it for hours on end. It's a waste of time. It really is.
It is. But then when you think you have a classroom of 25 kids, let's say an average classroom, 25 kids, everyone is at a different space. They're coming in from who knows what every child has come into school that day from as well. And you have to, you have your mandate as a teacher that you have to finish something for that year or that week or that month. And so, the easiest way to get a large group of people to do something within that structure is to follow that structure of top down. This is what we're going to do. This is continuous practice, because maybe these kids get it and they only need it this time, but these other ones, because they don't enjoy it. Maybe they, I know a lot of kids, actually, we don't realize that just their fine motor skills of holding a pen or pencil for a certain amount of time, their bones are not even ready for that. So, it's not even about their motivation. Physically, a lot of kids aren't even ready to do that over and over again. And so like they just, to get used to that structure, they're starting early to kind of drill it in so that you just accept it after a while, right? Your body gets into that, okay, this is what I got to do. I got to come in, sit down, get my book out, get my pencil out. How many times like here, there's that comment like, get ready, make sure you're in your desk with your books open, your papers out and your pencils ready. Like that's a common, and you hear it's drilled in, like I can say, because it's drilled into you. And after time, you just do what's drilled into you without even questioning it as well. And I'm not saying that that's like kids. There are so many ways that if you want them to be writing, or if they want to be writing, that they can learn those skills. but it's also hard to, maybe a sandbox where they can play with their fingers and build things, or just learn to building Lego and learning their fine motor skills, or like painting instead, or doing different things like that. When you have a big class, to have all those kids to do something when you yourself as a teacher have this specific mandate on you, they have a hard, it's about control, right? So it's hard to control independence for you.
But Robyn, how do you combine that fire that certainly lives inside you for helping as many people to see what unschooling, homeschooling, living a self-directed life as a child can do with your work for the public sector or the school system? Can you bring some of it in, or do they look at you as an odd one out, where it's like, is he trying to break us down from the inside?
I'm definitely the odd one out, always, for sure. But I knew that coming in, that I was going to be the odd one out. I think I go into it, not to say that I don't get frustrated. I absolutely do, or discouraged or angry. But I have gone into it and try and remember that in so many, I'm the person who is the example or showing that it can be different in more ways than one. I'm that person, because I'm that odd person out coming in. It's okay. Actually, I know of times where this is looked different, and this is how it's worked out. And with my work with the community, the homeschooling community and self-directed learning community, I have a lot of those stories and experiences and things shared with me now, where I can say, actually, it's not just my family. It's this family, this family, this family. Here's an example. This is actually, no, it doesn't look, if you don't do it this way, it doesn't turn out this way. And here's how I know. So we talked about that conversation, how sometimes we're the first opening. I've gone into this knowing that for many people, I am that first opening. And they might not be converted, or they might not change their mind right away, but at least through me, they've been able to see something different. And I know, as much as I like to keep my kids' privacy, and I do share some things, about what they're doing. And they will, like, they've done Q&As. I have a Patreon where, my kids have come on and answered questions and things like that, whenever they're comfortable to do that. But at the same time, I also realize, especially in our community, a small community, that my kids are an example of doing something different for many, because it's not just me talking about it. Many know my kids, and they're like, oh, well, actually, I know these kids are, they're able to be leaders and still get it. And even though they've never attended school, my daughter plays sports. One of the things is my daughter plays school sports. And she's a great athlete. And she's like, she's leads her team, and her coaches are teachers, and they've chosen her to be captain, and she's won awards. And and they tell her, even though she's never been in that specific stream, she's able to follow directions. She's able to practice. I know, surprise, surprise. She's kind, she's encouraging, and you're a leader, you stand out. And that's why we're asking you to lead this team, and she has, those things where she understands that she's a volleyball player. She loves it, but she also has the time to practice. The kids are in school. She's at home practicing her drills. She wants to. She's at home rewatching games and like understanding what they missed and how the plays are going. She's watching higher level games to understand, and so she, even though her path is different, she's then excelling at something where most mainstream kids are in. So it's like, how does that happen? And so in some ways, it's also, they are a bit of an example that, they're nice kids, they're happy kids. And that does, when you go out and your kids are kind and they speak to adults and they shake your hand, or, things that, they ask questions, it gets noticed, right? And then when they're like, so what school do you go to? I homeschool. Oh, okay. So what's your, my friend and I, who's another unschooling mom, our kids are friends, and we were laughing because, I'd said, there was someone who would ask, my daughter what her favorite subject is. And I didn't know what she was going to say. She said math. And most people, math, and kind of caught them off because they're like, you like math? She's like, yeah, I really like it. Like, I like math. I like the challenge of numbers. I like problem solving. And it was like, they didn't ask her any more questions because they were actually stumped that someone said that they enjoy math in that way. And they just kind of were like, oh, okay. So yeah. So that's how it's a long answer to that, but that's how I do that role.
One of the things being able to give this gift to our children to live like we do, I'm very happy that we are that. But one of the hidden benefits I hadn't thought about was the personal learning journey for the parent.
You just learned to knit.
I just learned to knit 2 days ago. Yeah, man. I'm 48 now, and I always was like,
would never happen.
And then our daughter was like, "Come on, Dad, it's time. Let me show you how to do it." Then I'm really shitty still, but I kind of like it.
You're good for a beginner.
Yes, okay, I'm good for a beginner.
It's a learning process. Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
But that was it's among the personal developments. I've never would have thought I would become a knitter, and I look forward to making my first scarf at some time. But that said, then sometimes I'm like, okay, wonder where I would have been in my life if we hadn't turned down this homeschooling, because it has given so many gifts. And maybe it's because we need to ask ourselves questions all the time about, okay, we are doing it like this. Why are we doing it like that? And it's one of the greatest things, I believe, for parents' sake.
It is. It's one of the greatest things. It's one of the hardest things, I find too. And I find many times that's why some parents don't continue the journey, to it becomes too difficult for them. It can be confronting, right? Because all of those things you believe to be true, totally confronting. All of a sudden, you have this mirror being held up to you, and everything you thought should be a certain way, and everyone's proved it to be a certain way. That's like all that truth is gone. It's something different, and it can be scary. And working on ourselves, that is life, but it's difficult. We're kind of that personal learning journey, right? So yeah, it's one of the greatest gifts, but it's also the work to be put in. But when you put it in, it's the reward.
I think it's been amazing. Mm-hmm. We've been doing it for 11 years, something like that now. I think, it's been confronting. I've been scared shitless several times about their future, and and sometimes I've been very frustrated, but mostly I find it amazing. I love to learn with my children when it's finally something you could, that looks like learning. I just love to do all this nerdy stuff someone asks a question and then we spend a week looking for crazy answers, and it's so much fun. It's the best way to do it. I love it. It really is. It's not the purpose at all. It's just like part of the life that we live together is that we get curious on things and we start to investigate. And I am beyond the agenda thing now. I think in the beginning I would still have the filter, this is math or this is history, and now it's just fun. It really is fun, and it really is a privilege to have time to study. We realize that as well. We have to make money, we have to move around, we have to do the dishes, there's all this sleeping to do, and showers take time, and all of this. And do we really have 3 hours to sit down and study French? Where do we find it? Now the phone rings again, and finally getting that time really is a treasure, and we all love it. It really is. What do you do in your free time? I do Islamic art, or totally the reverse of school children who just wants to chill, and we chill all the time. I don't know, do we chill all the time? No, but
when they have time, they want to do stuff.
The focus time is just that's what we do on Sundays. That's
Yeah.
Good times.
And I think that's the time is the other gift, right? And being able to spend the time, and then that is part of the personal learning journey for the parents too, is that time where you're not rushed and having to fit something in. You have the time to explore, be curious. And I think that's the big thing that kids lose, is that joy and curiosity, because it's kind of hammered out of them. And that shifts their like being in life and the way they live their everyday. Being curious and joyful is a game changer. Yeah, it really is in so many ways.
But I actually think the most important thing we get from this lifestyle, or the children get when you compare it to school children, is that while they own their own time, they actually have the inner space to mature. It's okay that just the processes of inner life of children growing, their presence in this life on this planet, they grow their personality, they handle the inner changes. We have 3 teenagers at the moment, and it's there's a lot going on. And honestly, they wouldn't have time for high school. They really need the hammock and the novel and some peace. Sometimes we even, can we say that out loud? Sometimes we even just do everything for them. We cook and we clean and we do all the dishes, laundry, everything. And is it fair? Maybe not, but they really need their space. It's so clear to me sometimes they just need to sleep and to hang out, to binge watch TV series, just have some pausing time to let all this inner thing happen. Just let it happen. We don't even have to talk about it or evaluate it, but how, if we were stealing 8-10 hours of their day by schooling them, how would they have the time for this? This would be under such a pressure, and I don't know how they would handle it.
Well, they wouldn't have the time.
You have this caterpillar, and then it goes into, what is it called? I don't know in English. Before it becomes
the chrysalis, actually, or cocoon. Yeah.
I sometimes think about the hammock like the cocoon, like my teenagers are like cooking there. They just need their space, their peace, their nothing.
It's funny. We have 2 hammocks that use all the time. Our one always stays outside. The other one is mobile. So for winter, we brought it into the living room, and like my son, he's in the hammock all the time, and just swinging and my daughter, when it's nice outside, she's in the hammock outside all the, but it's funny that the hammock is the space. It's the place.
Literally, but also figuratively speaking.
The cocoon, it is the cocoon, right? It kind of envelops and encloses.
But I think this is like very, very important. From this, you get adults who actually fulfilled all of the stages of maturing. So they come out real.
They come out faster matured, I also believe. If I look at my life and normal public school, I matured very late on a lot of levels.
In some ways
I'm still cooking. No, but seriously, I'm looking at my life now and I'm seeing like, I did this because of my inner insecurity. When we started traveling, I needed a big red bus so I could kind of show it in the face for people instead of just saying, hey, we just travel in whatever. And I think, I hope that our children will have an easier walk in life as they have had time to mature without all those external forces and literally just had the time for it.
Well, I think it'll be easier in the way of they'll be more connected with themselves because they've had the time to do that, and because they're connected with you, to be a person who, like, for a person who comes into the world as an adult, understanding themselves and being more confident with themselves, and also living a life that is not that other way, and being like, so, I'm used to choosing something that maybe looks different from somebody else. I'm used to living a life and around people who are doing things that are true to their values, true to themselves, instead of the other way. Then yeah, absolutely, it puts them at an advantage in that way early on. Like I'm 45 and I'm still, it's the same. There's still things I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Because now I see that was like, I'm still working this out from when I was 15 years old. I'm still choosing this because I've done this pattern for so long, but really it's like went back to here. And that's what I'm, practicing still in my life. And I just never recognized it until now. So I've had the chance till now.
Because you didn't have the time when you were 15.
No, I didn't have the time. I didn't feel safe to explore or ask about it. All of those things. Exactly. I was surrounded by a group of kids, like you do at school, who were the same age, going through similar things that didn't have any examples or time to work through it themselves. So we just all, no experience, no other connection. We had to make this like haphazard connection to try and just make our way through. We were surviving. In so many ways, I'm like, there were so many years I was just barely surviving, doing the best that you can that way. And everyone else around me was the same. Like my husband and I stayed up late last night talking in our bed and talking about our teenage years. And like we do that often, reflecting, because it was so different for us as it is for our kids. And I know for you guys, you're talking about that too, that, we were actually like, you realize an adult, we're like, wow, like so many of our friends, we were all just surviving. And we thought it was fun and normal. But when I look back now as an adult, I think like, wow, I'm a concerned parent at us as children. Like when I look at our friends in our childhood, I think, oof, wow, some of us didn't make it through. I know that. Some of us are not here anymore because they didn't survive. And, and some at the same time, it's hindsight's 2020 as well. Like, but looking back now and seeing what that was, it was not supportive for teens and children at all.
I think we should find a place to land this conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock.
I envy all that sunlight.
Oh yeah,
we just lost it here.
We lost the sunlight here.
Oh, it's coming in.
Yeah, it's in your end now.
Robyn, it has been fantastic talking to you. And have given me a lot of stuff I want to go and continue pondering about. To make a proper ending, then if people want to get to know more about you, where can they find you? Where can they read some stuff you do? And if you can drop some mentions about where they can find you.
Yeah, just you can Google, honey, I'm homeschooling the kids. So I have my podcast, my website. I'm on social media on Instagram and Facebook. The biggest thing is my podcast community. I have a Patreon community where it's a private community for conversations. I have different platforms. I'm on Clubhouse, where I have a club where we host conversations like this as well for people to access and listen and be part of. But really go to my podcast and my website, honey, I'm homeschooling the kids, my Instagram or Facebook, and you can connect with me, hear stories and find me. Yeah, absolutely. And hear stories from others as well. Yeah. That's the biggest thing, is sharing those stories. I would love to have you two on the podcast to share your story.
We would love that.
Let's do a reverse.
Let's do a reverse. We would love that. Okay. Robyn, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you liked it, then please share it with all your friends and family. We would also love it if you gave our podcast a review. Thanks. And if you want to support our podcast and work, then you can find us on patreon.com/The Conrad Family. We will continue to travel full time. And if you want to tag along, then please follow us on Facebook and Instagram @The Conrad Family. And you can also read more than 100 blog posts on our website, theconrad.family. Until next time, make a wonderful day. Thank you.